I think the bigger issue isn't like, are we ready for AI? Because it's going to happen.
Sure.
Right. I think it is, how do we as a community deal with the fact that there's just going to be less jobs because of it?
Welcome to the Nashville Current Podcast. I am your host, Ed Clay, and today we have my old friend from Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, man.
Mike Freeman. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
See ya. We go back a ways.
A ways.
Yeah. To the 90s.
Yes. Let's see. We're in 2021. Had to
Yeah.
think about that for a second. And gosh, yeah, the 90s. Did we meet before wrestling, or
No.
was it in jiu-jitsu?
So we met in high school when Coach Taylor, your old coach, became my new coach.
Okay.
And at the time, our wrestling program had, I think, 6 guys on our team. And so we would go to the wrestling room, and we didn't have enough people to wrestle with. So Coach Taylor was like, we're going to go back over to Overton. And so we walked across the street, and I started working out with, oh, man, what was the heavyweight's name?
William Haddon.
William Haddon.
Oh, yeah, Big Willie.
He's not so big anymore.
No.
But, so that's when we met. And all those guys, man, Brian Larimer and Kyle Langford and all those guys.
The whole crew. Those were some amazing times back then.
Yeah, it was.
The Coach Taylor, he was my coach my freshman and sophomore year, and then I left junior year. And, of course, Overton won 3 state championships in wrestling while I was there.
Yeah.
So when Coach Taylor left, it was like, no, you can't leave.
Yeah.
I was so upset.
Yeah, he and Coach, was it Gabriel?
Coach Gabriel.
Those were the studs
Gabe.
back in the day.
Yeah, Gabe was, he's still, I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing coaches, and he's still one of the best coaches ever.
Yeah.
He was the first coach that didn't scream at me.
Really?
And, yes, first one.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, oh, he motivated me.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that?
Yeah.
But, he was a great coach, so.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. And it was cool too. Like, we were opposing teams, but we were welcome, and it was all about like the competition of sport. It wasn't, we're gonna do whatever we can to beat you guys, and
Sure.
it was like, whatever. If my guys are better than your guys, we'll win. If vice versa, then you'll win. And it was a lot of fun back then.
It was a lot of fun back then. Do you ever talk to Coach Taylor?
Yeah, man, I saw him actually at Nate's funeral. So he showed up. And I'd run into him a couple times, like at the grocery store and stuff like that. But oddly enough, he now coaches. I don't think he's coaching wrestling anymore. He's just teaching. But he's at Hillwood, and I live at the other end of the street. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, we've talked about getting together, but haven't done it. So
That happens over the years.
Yeah.
Do you talk to any of the old wrestling people
I do.
anymore?
Yeah. If you remember Matt Brewer.
Yeah.
So he would have been pretty young when we were with you guys, but he won state the year after we left. And so Matt and I have worked together on a couple projects. We started that Airbnb magazine together.
Oh, cool.
And man, that was killed by COVID. I mean, just destroyed. Nobody wanted to go stay in an Airbnb. We couldn't sell advertising into promoting somebody who's staying at Airbnb. So
Sure.
we shut it down pretty quickly. And it was good. It's always fun working with friends, like there's a different understanding, a different level of understanding that you have with somebody that you're friends with as opposed to somebody that you just work with. So
Sure. Yeah, I know my 2 business partners, we're all also like really, really great friends.
yeah.
And I wouldn't want to work with anybody else besides quite frankly, or friends in general. I like working with friends and the camaraderie. They might not take what you say as personal because they know who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. You can also have like different types of arguments with your friends,
Yeah.
And like those arguments become fights.
Yeah. There you go.
So you really get down to the bottom of the issue that way.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Well, yeah. So Scott and Dedrick, you might know Dedrick Perry. He went to TSU. He's my business partner in the hospital group, and he was running Nashville MMA for a while too. He actually bought Nashville MMA when I sold it. But it's him and Scott Nelson. Scott owned OTM from the jiu-jitsu world. He also owns Lucky Geese.
Yeah.
And so we've all been friends for so many years. And going into this project was like, we basically lived together on and off for 6 years.
Yeah.
And worked together, and and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
So, what do you got going on now?
Man, I got a lot. I've got two little babies. I got a 1-year-old little girl who started walking and is growing teeth. And, when we have a little boy who's about 5.5, 6 years old. Mm-hmm. And, man, they're just completely on different sides of the spectrum, right? The little boy is just chaos and explosions and, wants every little toy to like fight each other. And then our little girl will just come up and hug you and lay your head on your shoulder. And just recently she'll give you a hug and she starts doing this where she's just tapping you. It's so sweet, man. So, but aside from that, man, I've got a couple different things. So I am working for a company called Tutor Up, which is a platform that matches parents looking for tutors with tutors that want to work on the side. So we started the company, I guess, about 4 years ago. And in that time, we had some like ideas and I say they had some ideas for how it should work and what would happen. And and so I guess about 2 years into the business, the CEO stepped down. They brought in a new CEO who I've worked a lot with in the past, a guy named Ray Cap. And he brought me in right out of the gate and was like, Mike, fix this. And so, so we've been working towards lowering the quantity of tutors, increasing the quality of tutors, understanding what our customers are looking for. So I spend a lot of time actually watching like recordings of the traffic that comes to our site and making notes of like, oh, this person is looking for this. And then work with our developers to build the tools to kind of help them find what they're looking for. So interesting.
So you said it's more quality than quantity. What's a good amount?
So I don't know that I have the right answer for that, but one of the things that we did when we started, we had like 3,000 tutors, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a big selling point for us to say, hey, we got 3,000 tutors. Part of the reason that we needed the 3,000 is we were all over the country, right? So we were in-person tutoring. So we compared it to the old like piano teacher thing where you'd call somebody up, they'd show up at your house, tutor your child, and that was that. And it was really difficult for us because we had to not only market on a national scale, but then also like have inventory in those markets. So we would get somebody from, South Dakota that's looking for a 8th grade algebra tutor. And then we'd go in our database and, hey, we don't have any 8th grade algebra tutors and, wherever that person is. I couldn't even think of a name in South Dakota City. But so when COVID hit, it actually was really good for us because it said, okay, look, like doing this in-person stuff doesn't make any sense. So let's really push to the online. So we got a whitelisted video platform. We trained all our tutors on how to do online tutoring. And so when we went to online, instead of having, 5 teachers in Memphis, now we have all of the tutors that we had, but online. So they could be anywhere, whenever. So we have people from the West Coast tutoring with people in New York. We have, it's all over, right? So it made our business much larger and actually much easier to deliver on the service because no longer did we have to find somebody in a specific area. All we had to do was find somebody that fit the grade level and the subject.
Sure.
So because of that, we didn't need as many tutors to support the delivery. Mm-hmm. So we kind of went through and culled a lot of the tutors that were in the system that didn't necessarily need to be. And then we started onboarding new tutors, but really focusing on more tech-driven talent. So I think this is genius, but one of the guys that used to work for us came up with the idea of when we're onboarding the tutors, we ask them a question and we say, what browser do you use? And we don't really care what browser they use, but if they said, well, I don't know what browser I use. Not tech people at all. Browser they're in. So the ability to do like an online tutoring session becomes very difficult.
So you've got the tutoring company you're working for. What else do you have going on?
So I've got a couple other kind of like irons in the fire. So I started, I guess about a little bit over a year ago, a project called Launch Engine that started out by the pseudonym Red Badge. And we were like, yeah, Red Badge of Courage. It takes courage to be an entrepreneur. And then we talked to everybody and they're like, yeah, what does Red Badge mean? I don't know what Red Badge means. Is it like a Republican thing? And so then we changed it to Launch Engine because I'm kind of a nerd and I thought that sounded cool. And I actually started Launch Engine, and it is a basically a storytelling platform, news journal, magazine, kind of whatever you want to call it. But we basically interview business owners, entrepreneurs, people who've been successful, people who've failed, to try to understand what it takes to make it. And so we've talked to all different types of people. And as it's grown, we've kind of gotten to the point where we sort of have like themes that we write about, right? So we'll talk about something with entrepreneurs one day. The next day we'll write something about something in the tech industry. We'll look at like people that read analytics every day and kind of what they look for, things like that. And so we're kind of at the point now where I think we're going to begin splitting that up into 3 different sections, right? So one is going to be just entrepreneur content. Another one, we're going to create a new brand for it. But the other one is going to be just on like the tech industry in Nashville, right? Like Nashville has this enormous tech industry, and we bring tons of people every year from Silicon Valley, from Washington State, from New York, and they all want to work in Nashville, and they want to work on projects in Nashville. And so that community is getting so big that there's really not a combined voice that talks to a lot of them. So we see an opportunity for that, and then also with like the Nashville Arts Magazine is no more. There's not a good arts community magazine in Nashville right now. If you're listening and you have one, I apologize. But
All right.
But yeah, it's there's not a voice for the arts, and I was a graphic designer for 15 years, and creativity in arts is one of the first things to get downsized. If a company slows down, it's one of the only things that if you're running a nonprofit and you have a big event, you're going to pay your caterer, you're going to pay the security guy. You're probably going to ask some young graphic designer to do something for free. And so that's why we kind of want to create a voice for that, to be able to kind of fight for the voices or fight for the people that don't have a voice of their own. So
Nice.
Yeah.
You were talking about the tech industry in Nashville. I don't think most people know that Nashville has really a booming tech industry, especially that's growing. Talk about that a little bit.
So, yeah, I mean, man, it's, you go back, as little as 10 years, and there were no big tech companies, right? There were a couple of companies that tried to become server companies and hosting companies and things like that.
Yeah.
But there were not many, like real tech companies. And now you look around and there's all these types of small businesses that have, a handful of programmers that you can hire to do whatever you want. And that just didn't exist years ago. And it's interesting. I don't really know why Nashville has been chosen to be like a new tech startup community. But I heard a story years ago. So I used to work for this guy, and we would, entertain investors, right? People that would come into town that were interested in putting money into our business. And so we would go out and take them to lunch and talk about, the different things that we were doing. And he always would tell the exact same story, right? So he had this BMW convertible and he put the top down and we'd ride around town and he would say, this is where this, music label used to work. And this is where this guy, wrote his first hit song. And, but the most interesting story is why Nashville became Music City. And I'd never heard this. I don't know if you have.
No.
But so back in the day, right, we didn't have CDs or streaming music or anything like that. The only way that you got new music out was through the radio, right? So Nashville had invested in this huge tower. And I think it was the LNC tower. But they had these giant radio antennas on top of the tower, right? And so that gave you the largest broadcast of any city. And so you'd hit, all these major cities that Nashville is near, right?
Wow.
And so all these musicians wanted to come and they wanted to play on the radio in Nashville. So when those musicians came, the session musicians came, and the people to repair their instruments moved to Nashville.
Sure.
And so you had all these peripheral communities that popped into Nashville because we have this giant radio tower that's going to send it out. So you tell the story is that's how Nashville became Music City. But the story of Nashville is really, it's a tech city, right? We invested in technology that drove people here, right? And so years later, we're still benefiting from the investment that whoever put that tower up, I don't know if it's a city or a private person or what, but
sure.
But so that's why, when you go downtown and you look at it's not the Gaylord, what is it? The Bridgestone Arena. Mm-hmm. That's why it's that big radio tower. So
I see.
That is sort of a nod to our heritage of we became Music City because it was a tech thing, not we just happen to be good at music in Nashville. So
and so I guess the last 10 years though, there's been a lot more tech people, coming in. What companies are coming in right now?
Oh man, well, so Oracle just announced that they're building a huge building. Amazon's coming here, and when those two come, right, there's going to be also other things that happen from that, right? So Amazon just announced is it 12? I don't even remember what the number was. It's an enormous amount of money that they're spending to make affordable housing for their employees.
That's good.
You
need it.
So yeah,
Nashville needs affordable housing. Good Lord.
Yeah, it does.
It's been
it's nuts.
It's crazy. But that's good that they're doing that. And what do you think? So Amazon coming in, for instance, people are trashing Bezos right now for not paying taxes.
Yeah.
The reality is he's not necessarily bringing in income. When they look at this vast amount of money, it's net worth. His net worth is flying up. But of course, I haven't looked at his specific taxes, but they say he doesn't pay anything. With kind of how society's pushing right now, magnifying glasses on everything. What's your view on that with somebody like a Bezos or an Amazon coming to Nashville, getting all these tax breaks?
I don't know, man. I think a lot of the hate that Bezos gets is jealousy, probably. I mean, who wouldn't want to be in his shoes, right? The guy owns, the largest company in the world. They employ over 1 million people. I mean, that guy, I think they said that he couldn't spend the money that he's made in 1,000 years, right?
Wow.
So I don't know how much of it's jealousy. I mean, at the same time though, that guy is smart enough to figure out how to hire accountants to move his money around to where he's not paying any taxes, right?
Right.
So I don't know. What do I think about Amazon coming to Nashville? I don't know. I mean, it depends on I don't know what kind of deal we gave them, what type of tax incentives to build their building or what it is that they're going to do. But I hope that, our growth is sustainable growth and not just growth for growth's sake. And if we gave them so much that in 10 years we're not going to recoup the investment that they made or that we've made, then I don't really like that.
Then it doesn't make sense. I guess you'd have to, take into consideration all of their employees that are living here and all the taxes that they're paying and all of those things as well. It's, you look overall, some of the deals that have been made downtown, a lot of the buildings aren't, not paying any taxes.
Yeah.
And, but the little guy, we feel our taxes.
Yeah.
With every tax raise.
Are you still the little guy?
I absolutely am. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. It's last year was humbling.
Yeah.
Of how little I am.
Yeah, right.
So, but we do. When you start a small business, and that's what I don't think. People don't realize. Like all of these, they are categorizing like the smaller business owners as like big business owners. All corporations are the same. Yeah. And it's not. I mean,
well, the problem isn't that. It's the problem that a small business through the SBA is anybody that's, I think it's below 500 people, 500 employees is a small business.
Yeah.
You have, that stat might be wildly inaccurate and it might be something else. But when I think of a small business, I think of, some guy who got a sticker and put it on his car, doesn't have an office and he's running around, doing pressure washing for somebody. Like that's what I think of when I see a small business, right? I don't see a small business as being, 50 employees, and having a staff that size. I just don't. I mean, I think that's where the bigger issue is.
Yeah, right? No, that's a good point. But like seeing the deals like the 5th and Broadway deal. Mm-hmm. I forget what. I think the city sold it for $4 or $5 million. The entire all the land. Then they paid for the convention center to get taken down, and it's from a group out of state. But I went over there, and I must say,
it's cool.
It's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And so
I hate downtown now. Like
sure,
it's rough.
It's different.
But I drove by that, and it's gorgeous. Like it's beautiful, and
inside is really cool, man.
I haven't been inside. We just drove by it.
What they've done with the food courts, they got such great restaurants in there. There's live music in different spots.
Yeah.
And it was done really well.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's going to add to our city for years, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, when we got the new convention center, was all up in arms about how much money we were going to spend. And but, I mean, we have people from all over the country selecting Nashville to hold their event. And so they stay in our hotels, they eat in our restaurants, they shop in our stores when they're here. So it's not just the convention center, but it's all of the stuff that happens from that. So
yeah, it's been interesting watching the city grow. Obviously, it's a much different city than it was when we were growing up. I would have called it a town when we were growing up. I don't know.
I was telling somebody the other day, like when I was in high school, we used to go down Thursday nights to downtown. Right? Remember Dancing District?
Oh, yeah.
And like everybody had their like cliques and spots that they would hang out in.
Yeah.
But I used to drive downtown, park for free, and, go and listen to a free concert and go back home. And now in Nashville, I drove downtown for a meeting that I was in for like 15 minutes. And I think I paid $35 to park.
Yeah.
So it's like you have these, like the good old days in Nashville were a lot of fun. Yeah. But now, like, there's so much more opportunity here, but it's changed a lot. It's a different city. So
it has. You can still get the same, like the concerts and stuff.
Yeah.
In different areas that don't feel so crowded. I mean, that part's kind of something that we still have, but it has lost that to me the hometown feel. Like they say that we're unicorns. Being born and raised here.
Yeah. I mean, I used to go out, and whenever I would go out, I'd run into 5 people I knew that I went to high school with, or I've known for 20 years. And now you don't get that. I mean, it's, everybody's from Ohio, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. Ohio, California.
Yeah.
Where do you see Nashville growing, in the next 10 years with tech, with music, with sports, with growing as a city?
So I think we'll probably get more sports teams. I think that the Titans have, done really well in Nashville. I think the Preds have done really well. Now we got a soccer team. I think the next thing is maybe a basketball team, maybe a baseball team. So I think that's probably going to happen in the next 10 years. With the tech community, man, it's going to be weird, right? Like the tech community, and especially since COVID, has proven that you don't need to be in a city, right? And you don't need to pay $400,000 to live in a area that's close to downtown, right? So I think people are going to keep spreading out. I think, and if you look at it right now, like the collar counties around Nashville, we were looking at homes the other day in Kingston Springs that are like $700,000. I mean, that blew my mind that, you go back 10 years and like nobody lives there, and now it's like, oh yeah, it's $750,000 home. So who knows what that's going to do in terms of like spreading out. I think we're going to see more of that because people aren't going to be going into offices as much. People are going to be working from home. I've been so much more productive not having to go in an office. It's incredible. Like,
interesting.
I get to have family time in the morning. I'm not rushed to get out of the house. And so we'll have breakfast together. I'll go to work. I'll work my whole day. I think I probably take less breaks because I'm just like, I'm home. I don't really have to go and relax or anything. And then my day's over. I go up and have family time. I go and we'll eat dinner. We'll do whatever. And then if there's something else that I need to do, like I can just walk back into my office. I wouldn't go back into the office. I wouldn't go back to work. But if I can just go downstairs, so I have like a split level house and I work downstairs. And if I could do that, it's great. And so I think a lot of people are going to see that, right? There obviously are a lot of people that, hate having to work from home and they feel like they never get to turn off. And, but I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always done my own stuff. And it's the type of thing where you have to set boundaries, right? Sure. So even when I lived in a small apartment and I worked from home, I would just shut the door, right? And it's like that separation of I'm not always working. I still get to have my own personal time. But the ease of being able to open your door and sit down and be productive is really nice. Yeah.
I mean, see, you're an entrepreneur and I think that, if for people like us, we're used to, like you said, working at home. I like working at home as well. And,
I hate having to put pants on.
Right. Yeah. We were out raising money a couple of years ago, and I was in I would be doing Zoom presentations in shorts and a suit with a tie,
Yeah. So this is really funny, but COVID for us started, my son's school closed in March. And so from March and then in July, my wife had a baby, right? So then she was off for like 3 months. So our thing was basically like from March until October, we didn't leave the house. Like we were at home. And I think it was probably November, at some point in November. But there was a meeting and they're like, hey, we really want to do an in-person meeting. Things are kind of getting a little bit better. We'll all sit on different sides of the table and far apart. And so I went into my first meeting and it was like my first time to put my shirt on. And I was like, oh, my pants are tighter. Damn it. And I forgot and I wore Crocs. So I walk into this meeting and like I'm dressed real nice and I'm wearing Crocs. So
what'd they say?
Everybody laughed at me.
Like, oh, sorry, I forgot.
I
forgot.
Yeah.
Been on for a long time. What was that like for you? Like last March when everything was shutting down, what were the thoughts going through your head? And
it was, I feel like I was really fortunate and I got really lucky, right? So I was already working from home. And it just so happened that the company that I worked for was like really poised in a position where that was almost a good thing for us. As horrible as that sounds, but it really kind of helped us because we were able to really pivot into something that made our business more sustainable, more able to grow. And I enjoyed having my kids with me all the time. And I could run upstairs and talk to my son and see what he's been up to. And so it was oddly kind of great for me. So yeah,
for you it was good. That's good. Yeah, I mean, obviously
I feel bad, man, because I look around and
don't feel bad.
Yeah,
it's great that you had a good experience through a tough time in general.
Yeah.
I think everybody has their story with what went on last year.
Yeah.
What was going on through your mind though? Were you worried? Were you thinking?
Man, it was a weird. It was all surreal, right? And you know, my cousin actually called me up one day and told me that he was like, hey man, I bought what did he buy? He bought like a 22 rifle or something. And I was like, what for? And he's like, oh man, you know, it's just for shooting small game. And like, that's when it dawned on me, like, there are people that think that we're about to, like, the world's going to stop and the power's going to go out and internet's going to be done and we're going to be shooting squirrels from trees. Right. And that's what people thought. And it was weird because, you know, everybody talks about, like, oh, everybody bands together. Right. And I went to Costco and there was one lady buying, you know, 13 jumbo things of toilet paper for herself. That's not banding together.
No.
Right. So then Costco has to go in and institute like I think you'd only buy like 2 giant things of toilet paper. And but it was weird how quickly we devolved into every man for themselves.
Sure.
And you know, we like all those different like weird shortages of things that started like whoever thought toilet paper, right? What were some of the other ones like?
Oh, they were running out of just like regular items. People were stocking up on
pasta. That's what it was. I remember I went to the store and the entire pasta aisle was closed. Like it was just empty. And the only thing that was left were those like giant shells, which I thought was funny. Like nobody wants those.
Nobody wants those giant shells.
Yeah. Or the cheese was all gone except for like the vegan cheese, which was pretty good. But it was weird. It was just surreal. And it blew my mind how quickly everybody went from being a member of the community to I'm looking out for myself, right? I'm going to start shooting squirrels out of trees. I'm going to, you know, the preppers, you know, the prepper companies had a field day, right? And selling like boxed food and the ammo companies, you still can't buy ammo. And the price of ammo is outrageous compared to what it was 2 years ago. So,
yeah, that was all kind of strange. And I mean, I get the idea of thinking that the world might be coming to an end because, you know, you think that they're shutting down at first for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The world's largest economy.
Yeah.
You know, what is the ripple effects that are going to come from that? Like is there going to be civil unrest? Is there going, you know, all of those things were definitely going through my mind. Like it was the unknown.
Yeah.
You know, it happened, and thank God we didn't, people didn't go too crazy at the time, but it evolved into, you were talking about, it was every man for themselves. I would see these buzzwords, like we're all in this together and this and that. I'm like, you know, I don't believe it. I don't believe that people are united right now. And, you know,
absolutely. And I mean, you know, I think a lot of it goes back to poor leadership, right? And we didn't have a leader that was empathetic and cared for people in the way that maybe like Joe Biden would have, or even George Bush would have, right? And I think he really kind of stoked a lot of the fires in different communities, made people scared of things. You know, wasn't a good representative of how to stay safe and wear a mask. And I remember it was months into the pandemic until he actually put a mask on to go visit like a Tyson's chicken plant or something, or I forget what it was. But, you know, like that stuff, I think had you had somebody who was going on TV saying, we're going to be okay. We're going to be fine. Everybody work together. You don't need to start pooping more now that there's a pandemic, right? You're going to need the same amount of toilet paper you needed prior to the pandemic.
Well, you know, my issue with it wasn't just Trump, and I could go across the board, but I called Trump the divider in chief. I actually liked a lot of his policies. I think he did a lot of good things, but my concern the entire time was that we were going to get so divided. I was telling my Republican friends, like, hey guys, y'all need to speak out when he does things that are against your values, because to the left, it's going to embolden the left to come back even even more crazy.
Yeah.
And I felt like when the pandemic happened, I think across the board, the establishment, though, is pretty much full of shit. Let's look at Fauci, talking about masks. Fauci first said, you don't need a mask. You don't need a mask. A month later says you need a mask. He said, I'm sorry, I was lying to you because we didn't want to have a run of masks on healthcare workers. And, I didn't see anybody on the left calling him out. People will be like, it's like we should be calling him out overall. Like, hey, you can't lie to the American public and say something and not have the American public all of a sudden not trust you. At least parts of the American public. Certain people trust Fauci. But I think it was bad leadership across the board.
But I mean, here's the thing. And, the thing of science and what's important about science is that you're not always going to get the same answer, right? And new studies might tell you that, hey, what we learned 2 months ago is different later.
Fair enough.
And I think the worst thing you can do is put your foot in the ground and say, this is how I'm going to do it because that's how I want to do it, right? And it's the ability to be able to adapt and overcome, right? And if you don't, then that's the worst thing you could do. So this whole going back and forth between should we wear a mask, should we not wear a mask? There's different data that's going to tell you whether you should or shouldn't, right? And so they're saying now with the new Delta variant that people should start wearing masks again.
No, I get you on that. I as far as science changing and as the new science comes out, you follow the science. I'm all for that. I guess my point to it was he didn't do that. He said, because I lied to you because we didn't want to run on the mask for healthcare workers. Yeah. And I think that type of leadership coming from our top health official allows others who might not be trusting in general to really distrust you. And I really think that's what's happened. I mean, Fauci's a powerful dude.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to understand, within the scientific community, he is the head of the NIH. Or the NAIAD, National Allergy Infectious, it's a long one.
Yeah.
Branch of the NIH.
Yeah.
He gets to basically be the kingmaker in a way for who gets funding. Mm-hmm. So in the scientific communities, you're not getting scientists speaking their mind. Many of the scientists I know are afraid. Yeah. They're like, everything science has become so politicized. If you think a little different than Fauci, you're considered a Trump supporter.
Right.
If you think
sounds like some a Trump supporter would say. I'm joking.
Right.
By the
way, I wasn't a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
But I got called a right-wing conspiracy theorist Trump supporter. I'm like,
oh yeah.
Wait, what? Because of what?
Dude, I was telling you this the other day, but to my liberal friends, I'm conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And to my conservative friends, I'm the most liberal person they know. I'm this weird, I don't really fit in any type of mold. But okay, so think about this for a second. So Fauci doesn't do that, right? And Fauci said, everybody needs to go out and wear a mask, right? And then there's a run on PPE equipment or personal protection equipment. Mm-hmm. And then the hospitals can't get it, right? So then all the healthcare workers get sick and they're now dealing with the same thing their patients are dealing with. And there was already a shortage going into it, right? Mm-hmm. But so what's his job? His job is to keep us safe. And it's a calculated decision to say, we're not going to tell people to wear masks yet until we can get that population safe so that they can then turn around and help everybody else.
Sure. And I understand that was his way of thinking, but the consequence that I don't think he was weighing the consequence of becoming very much distrusted. He's done that a few times. Yeah. And so now when I hear Fauci talk, I'm like, I've stopped trusting Fauci completely. Yeah. I don't trust him at all. I mean, when he's dancing around the gain of function definition in these Senate hearings, it's like, come on, man. This is well, he makes the definition, by the way. Of gain, technically, if he says it's not gain of function, then it's not gain of function. But he's, being very crafty with his words. But I think he lost a lot of trust that way. And it's friends in public health. I mean, they say the same thing. My interpretation of what public health thinks is society's not smart enough to hear the truth, so we have to spoon feed them a bunch of BS. And
I think that's true.
Yeah, and so that's the attitude. I think we should side on honesty and being open with people. And are there idiots?
But I think you do that, and you see the people going to Costco getting 300 rolls of toilet paper, or the guy who filled his garage up with like, wasn't it toilet paper in Kentucky or something? And then I mean,
hand sanitizer and all the things, but it could go on.
Yeah,
but
and Amazon was like, we're not letting you sell that shit.
Right. Yeah,
I thought it was
I
great.
think he got arrested too.
Yeah.
But overall though, I think whenever you are dishonest though to the public and you're in a power position,
right.
Especially on something like masks at the time, it has had a ripple effect. I don't think that. Especially the left realizes the damage that caused. Same thing with the vaccines. He said that, at one time, I think we only need, I'm going to say 65%, I remember the number. And then he moved it up. He said, well, I didn't want to say a higher number before because, public wasn't ready to hear that yet. Mm-hmm. And, I understand his line of thinking. I'm just saying if maybe he could take a step.
But you got to, okay, so two things, right? Number one, what is his main motivation? Do you think his motivation is to keep the public safe and healthy?
I don't know.
So you think he's like, his interests lie in corporate fundraising, or?
I don't know. When I say I don't know, I wouldn't say I know either one. I just I've lost a lot of trust for him.
So okay, well, personally, I think that his main motivation is to keep us safe. Right. And if that means that we can't handle the truth, which probably the case looking at other things that have happened, I think
how does that one person get to make that decision for everybody?
That's a good point. Maybe there should be a group of people that get together and vote on it. And we're not going to tell them this, but I don't know. I tend to look at somebody like Dr. Fauci, and I trust that my best interests of, what I should and shouldn't be doing, I'm going to listen to, right? I don't think that he's out there to trick us and to tell us lies for his own personal interest, but to make sure that we as a community and a group can handle it. I think, if he were to just deliver horrible news, we as a group would lose our shit. And I think you can look at different scenarios and you can see how quickly civilizations devolve into survival of the fittest and every man for themselves. And so I think that's what he is trying to keep from happening by lying to us.
Yeah. But and it is a different way of thinking, but I do look at overall, like I don't know what his motivations are. I do question his motivations with a lot of different things, especially after, being lied to a number of times and just understanding, where he is, like he said the other day, well, probably a month ago, basically if you go against Anthony Fauci third person, you're going against science. Mm-hmm. And that's so painful to hear somebody like that say that. I
didn't hear him say it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But
and he did.
I do think also though, like I was talking with a guy actually last night who said, man, they shouldn't call this a vaccine. And I said, what are you talking about? He's like, it's a shot. And I was like, yeah, but it's a vaccine shot. And he goes, no, man, like you can still get it if you have the vaccine. I was like, you wear a bulletproof jacket, like you still get shot, but the chances of you getting shot are less than if you didn't have one.
Right.
And it just, he didn't get it. But in his head, he's heard this through conservative talk radio and Alex Jones and all those people telling him, this is terrible. You're not going to get this. They're putting chips inside of your body to track you. And like there are literally people that think that Bill Gates has somehow cornered his way in and is putting chips inside of the vaccine so that he can track you. Right?
Yeah, I read a poll. I think it was like 20% of people thought that.
And it's insane.
Yeah,
I mean,
that is...
and you know, the wild thing though, man, like if you look at like just the military, right? One of the things that the military has a lot of trouble doing is understanding where the rest of their groups are.
Sure.
Right. And they've got big ass backpacks with batteries and GPS systems that are sending signals and reporting on a position, and so that they can know where these people are. And it's very difficult for them to accurately show where somebody is. And then you include altitude and all these other things, and it's hard to know where other troops are when you're in active duty, like in a battlefield or whatever, right? Yet Bill Gates has figured out the technology to shrink it down into a shot that has no power source, that has no like receiver, GPS transmitter, whatever those things that are required to do it. But then that shot lives in your arm, and that your arm now becomes magnetic, and all those things. And it's just, but they've heard it. And there are people that are out there telling them this, and they don't question like the reality of like, how's that possible?
So I completely agree with you, but I would say the same on the other side. So my position is there's the super vaxxers and the anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of in the middle of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So for instance, my mom, pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
I didn't hug my mom for a year. I was very careful, or my dad, very careful with them. They're 70, 68 years old. That said,
a lovely woman. I remember her very well.
Yeah, she's awesome. She is rocking. And, but so I took it serious for that, but I also knew, being a younger, healthy person, I was interviewing Dr. Jahangir, who's the head of the coronavirus task force here in Nashville. And, the scientific community was telling the public to look at the data. And, maybe if, like what you're saying too, like they kind of have to lie to get the public to go along with it. Well, but I had a problem with the data the whole time. 'Cause I'm like, you're not looking at the data. And it was under the age of 40 at the time, nobody in Nashville had died. And I said, nationally, if you look at it, you're twice as likely to die in a car accident going to work this year than you are of dying of COVID if you get it under the age of 40. And, kind of going back and forth on the actual data, I think that, and that maybe that's where I say I don't really trust Fauci, but the data was presented in a way that to me was very dishonest. I think we could have made more logical decisions as a society if they would have really shot straight, like separate the young and the old for you. Like, you don't go hang out with your parents if they're older. Be really careful around people.
But so how do you do that in like sending kids to school, and they come home from school and have been around 24 other kids in their classroom, and then they come home to us and then they give it to us? Or
sure.
I mean, it's just, there are I don't know the data that you're talking about, but I look at it as like, why even take the chance, right?
Well, I guess I was going from the super vaxxers versus the anti-vaxxers, like where the idea is in the middle. I guess where I'm coming from is, if you break down the age groups specifically, 65 and up, 79% of deaths, 50 to 64, another 15%. So you're about 95% of the deaths above 50 years old. That's a lot. And if you could separate out specific society for the vaccine, I do question why someone younger would take it if they're really healthy. Now, if someone just wants to, I think everybody has a right. But, like, for instance, in England right now, if you look at what's going on in England, number one vaccinated country in the world. Yeah. Delta variant is going wild there. I think they had about...
Because they're all on an island.
Yeah, right. 50,000 cases. No, they had 50,000 cases yesterday or something like that. But you have less hospitalizations and less deaths. So the vaccine is doing its job in that sense of less people dying and being hospitalized. But it's still spreading, throughout. And I think that you have to take all those things into consideration.
Yeah, so I'm not, despite what you might think, I'm not a scientist. But... So I don't know this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like I've been vaccinated, right? I'm Team Moderna. So does that mean that I have less chance of getting it? Does it mean that I know that it means that I have less chance of like being very like deathly ill from getting it, right? But can I still get it and spread it? I don't know that.
You can absolutely get it and spread it.
Okay.
Yes.
Am I as likely, or does
Less
it lower
likely.
my likelihood?
Less likely.
So less likely to get it
And spread it.
and spread it. Very much less likely to die.
Yes.
Right. So why wouldn't we, if I'm less likely to spread it, right? If I'm less likely to get it, why wouldn't you tell everyone you know, go get it?
So,
And let me say this too. The Delta variant that we have is a byproduct of not enough people being vaccinated to make it so that the original version or variant couldn't become couldn't kind of get into the stream, right? Is that how it works?
I'm not sure about that, but it could be. I just haven't read up on that. But specifically, like, so these vaccines were passed under emergency use authorization,
right?
Which, if you have a drug going through the FDA process, you're looking at 10 to 15 years, about $1 billion. You got your patent life, 20 years, and that's how the system is. So this thing was pushed forward really fast.
But it's a vaccine.
It's a vaccine with a technology that's never been used before.
But doesn't the flu vaccine get created every year the same way?
No.
How does the flu vaccine get created?
The flu vaccine's been using older technology, and so
it's newer technology, so it's better.
I don't know about that. But actually, I like RNA technology for the future. I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying it really has not been studied.
Sure.
There's issues. For instance, my bigger concern for most people would be long COVID, like long haulers. The lasting effects that you get from COVID. But I'm concerned too about the spike protein, causing damage in both vaccines and people who get COVID.
Yeah.
So,
I know nothing about that. I literally know nothing about the science behind how they work or any of that stuff. And that's where I kind of look, and maybe I'm too trusting, but I don't think that the FDA is going to approve something that is going to then go out to 65% of our population that could cause serious harm.
And the pessimist in me says, you look at the opiate crisis that was started, because of oxycodone that was approved. It's supposed to be not addictive, from my understanding. And that's, and I'm not even saying there's anything like, I'm all for when people want to get the vaccine, like, go for it. But the idea that somehow questioning it after thinking through it a lot, I'm anti-vax by any means, which I'm not, or somehow I'm not following science, which I actually think that I am. That's the divide. Like, you and I can have a different position on this subject, which is fine. That's actually good when you have a disagreement and can talk. But it's the idea that you're either or, you're good or bad. You're bad at.
But that's just how we've become as a group. Like, you don't agree with me completely. Like, that's how it is on the left right now, right? If you're not the most liberal, progressive, left-wing person, then you're not a Democrat anymore, right? And I think that's kind of what's happened on the right? If you're not going to go storm the Capitol and drive a hover round, right? Like, you're not a Republican anymore. And I think that's a huge problem. I don't know what's caused it, but I've stopped going on social media. Like, my social media now is like one way, right? I share pictures of my kids, and I share really beautiful steaks that I cook, but that's pretty much it. I try really hard to not get into conversation with people, because it's so split, and people argue. And dude, my dad ran for mayor, and a really good friend of mine started, like, I would share stuff that the campaign would post, and this guy calls me up. Or doesn't call me up. I shared something, and then his comment is, "And how are we going to pay for that?" And it was just like, dude, we're friends. Like, this is what you're going to share on my Facebook page. Like, if you want to know, call me. I'll explain it to you. But like, don't try and start some flame war. He said some other stuff too. It's gotten so ugly and so divided. And so I don't know how you fix that, man.
Well,
I mean,
I think that both sides, like you're acknowledging what's going on the left. I think the right, I agree with you 100% about that. Because, when Trump was in office, like I said, I called him the divider in chief. Like, you can agree with his policy. Like, this guy's going to divide us into what actually I saw. And I saw the future. Like, I saw this, man.
Yeah.
This is where I saw the left being pushed to. The right was being righteous. We're right in this way. And now it's swung to the other side, to where the left is like, we're right and you're wrong. Vaccinated, unvaccinated, mask, no mask, we're in this together or not.
Yeah, everything's become
like
partisan. And
either or, and it's like, no. Whatever happened to being able to have conversations without attacking somebody's character?
Yeah.
Living in a society where we welcome different ideas.
Yeah.
And we need to know we don't know everything.
Yeah.
So what can we learn?
I don't know. I honestly, I think it starts with our kids, right? Like, I've tried to explain to my son that like variety is a really good thing, right? And having a monoculture of everybody thinking the exact same way is horrible. And the best thing that you can have are different viewpoints on different things. So I don't know how like you fix it in today's culture, right? Like, I think that you've got, it's just everybody's so dug into the trenches.
Dug in.
And it seems like anytime a politician goes back to center, they get decimated, right? And, you're leaving our party. Okay. We're not going to help you on anything, and you'll be out in 2 years. And I don't know how you fix it though, right? Like, both sides are literally like at a stalemate, and nobody's going to give an inch. And like, I think that Trump probably did some stuff that warranted him being impeached. But now, if you look at it, like the Republicans have already, like, I think before he even took office, had drawn up papers to have him impeached, to have Biden impeached, right? Like, right out of the gate. And so,
It's the tit for tat thing.
Yeah. At what point do we say, okay, look, guys, like, call it off, right? I think that we should have a no party system. I don't know how you do that. I mean, I think it's pretty much impossible, but I don't think somebody should run on a party platform, right? I think you run on like, here's what I believe, here's what I'm going to do. I don't need a party. I'm going to do it myself. And I think what winds up happening though is the party dictates, here are the things that you're going to do. Here are the things you'll get support and you'll get help, but you have to play within our boundaries.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, it doesn't help either group, and it hurts us as a whole. But yeah, I think.
Yeah, especially when we don't have like human connection too, like on the internet, social media. Actually, I was talking to Dedrick, my business partner, and we're talking about leadership. And we said leadership, really, like, who's leading now? It's the algorithm. It's the algorithm on social. The algorithm's the leadership.
What you do and don't see.
Yeah. So I mean, if you have these echo chambers on both sides, and people are being programmed to think a specific way, and it's causing a divide. And I wonder too, like, is society ready to have the conversation on AI? Are we at that point where AI is? I mean, if you look at what's happened on social media, TikTok, it's very, very, it's addictive.
I mean, it's going to happen whether we're ready or not, and it's already there, right? I think that AI is going to lead the way in so many industries just being gone, right? Mm-hmm. Look at what technology did to the music industry, right? Apple came out with iTunes. You got to be able to buy music whenever you wanted. You could buy individual songs instead of entire album. CDs, like, I don't know the last time you looked at the chart that shows little like CD sales. When's the last time you bought a CD?
I don't even know.
15 years, 10
Yeah,
years.
I
I mean, it's
15, 20 years
I don't
ago.
even have a CD player in my car.
Right.
Right. And so that level of the whole system is going to be turned upside down. Right. Think of that on so many different industries.
Right.
Right. So, food preparation, the way that you bank, the medical industry, like there's so many things that are going to obviate the need to have a human being sitting at a desk doing something, right? And it's going to change so much, right? And you talk to, Andrew Yang, and he says, yeah, it's here, right? The new frontier of AI is already here. And there are going to be so many jobs that just go away.
Sure.
That we're not going to need people to do anymore because we have a machine, right? I've got a machine that, sweeps my floors, and then there's another machine that follows behind it, and it's got like a little rubbing thing, and it squirts water and it mops my floors, right? But like think of that on a scale of, 10x, and all of these different things that we do today that are manual are going to be completely automated because it's just so much smarter, and it works around the clock. It doesn't take vacation, doesn't have sick days. It doesn't need, disability or health care or benefits or any of that stuff. It just works.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to scale a business and grow, we talked earlier about Amazon, right? And so, yeah, Amazon's going to bring some jobs here, right? Because people are going to be pickers and they're going to be picking up, different things. But those are people that are supported heavily by automation, right? So have you ever seen the inside of like the warehouses at Amazon?
I think I have, but I'm not.
So these little, I don't know what you call them, like they're little robots, right? And they're about, a little bit bigger than a Roomba, right? And so what they do is they're completely autonomous, and they'll go under a shelf, and they'll pick up the shelf, and they'll move the shelf into an assembly line, right? And then all of those things are all working by themselves. And there's this huge, gigantic warehouse where these things go in, pick up a shelf, and then move it. And then the person that works at Amazon has kind of like a Pip-Boy. Did you ever play Fallout?
No.
So they have like an iPad on their wrist, right? And it'll say, okay, for this one, look on the third shelf in the second bay. And so they look at their wrist and it says third shelf, second bay, and then they grab it, throw it in a box, and then fold it and then send it out, right? So that last step of a human grabbing something and putting it in a box and that's going to be automated, right? So like, yeah, we're getting this giant plant at Amazon, but in 5 years it might be completely automated anyway, right? So, I think the bigger issue isn't like, are we ready for AI? Because it's going to happen.
Sure.
Right. I think it is, how do we as a community deal with the fact that there's just going to be less jobs because of it. Right. I'm lucky because my career is more creative and, thinking of solutions for things.
Sure.
So I don't have to worry about it. But like if I change oil for a living in a car, right?
Yeah.
And then, somebody creates a robot that can just go in and recognize where my oil filter is and do all of that stuff. And then now, Jiffy Lube is a 24/7, totally autonomous. I drive in, they scan my card, change my oil, I drive out. I never have to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Like that's where this is going.
Yeah, there's a lot of jobs, and we do need to figure out, solutions, to that. I don't think those conversations are really being had that much. I know, like for instance, in radiology right now, pretty interesting. The AI can find a tumor better than a radiologist. Of course, the radiologist has to sign off on it. We're actually putting a digital pathology system in my hospital to where we can have the AI categorize the tumor and say what type of cancer it is and those type of things.
Yeah.
And then the pathologist signs off on it. So it's pretty cool, but at the same time, you know, there's a lot of industries that are going to be that it's going to be that dramatic. The AI does a better job than a human does on that.
I tell you, the scariest part of AI that I see is the deep fake side, right?
Yeah, man.
Where, you know, we haven't seen this yet, but if you look at how easy it is to tell people a falsity on Facebook and then pick it up and then spread it. And, you know, that saying, what is it? A lie has made its way around the world while the truth is still putting its shoes on, right? Mm-hmm. And I guarantee you that within the next couple years that there's going to be some major world leader, that there's going to be a deep fake that like, hey, we're bombing yada yada, or we're dropping a atomic bomb on Canada, or whatever it's going to be. But it's so good now that you can't tell the difference. I mean, it is like you really have to be a pro to watch it and go, oh yeah, that's not real. And I think that's the biggest fear that I have about how AI is being used. So
yeah, that's one that for sure is coming. Some of those deep fakes.
Yeah, that and the robot uprising. But
yeah, well, I think we still have a few more years for that one.
T800's what, 2035?
Yeah. No. Speaking of like the misinformation, so like right now, you're seeing the social media networks censored. Actually, they are censoring the public in general. Yeah. It happens to be mostly on the right that's getting censored. Of course, some people on the left.
Do you mean like Trump having his page removed, censorship?
That would be one.
Or the algorithm not sharing.
That would be one thing. I think that, well, that's another, the algorithm not sharing information from a specific political party. I think it can be, I'll give you an example. I'm having a conversation with one of our, with someone I do business with. Mm-hmm. We're going over numbers. He puts it on YouTube as an unregistered thing, and sends it to me. Hey, if you want to watch and go over the numbers again, here it is.
Yeah.
YouTube took it down. Nobody could see it except us, because I talked about something called ivermectin in the 30-minute conversation we were having. I was telling about some emails that were going back and forth with me and another scientist. And I was like, hey, he sent me this. He's kind of coming around in a way, because he was, the scientist I was talking to was, I don't say anti-ivermectin, but he was just being a good scientist and questioning the hell out of the data. And finally, he had sent me some data that was like, hey, they just went over 20 plus studies and it showed a 58% improvement in survival overall. And I was talking to him about that, and YouTube took it down.
Yeah.
So in the conversation, they could hear the word ivermectin and take your video down. He appealed it. He's like, wait a second, this is like a business to business video. And they rejected his appeal. You know, that's the type of censorship that really concerns me, because, you know, we can disagree, but when the side that is against you comes into power, you know, it's a very, very bad thing if they're able to use it as a weapon on both sides. Sure. I think right now it's really being used against Republicans and people that have different views than the quote pro-science left.
Yeah. So like, let's say Parler, for example, right? Did you go on Parler? Did you ever go on?
I was on there briefly.
So I created an account just to like create chaos. It was awesome. But yeah, like, what are your thoughts? Like, do you think Parler should be a thing?
Yes. I think any site should be allowed, as long as it's not spreading child pornography or something.
A haven for, like, just promoting hate crimes, and it was not like if the right wants to have a place to talk about whatever, they got that. It's Facebook, it's Reddit, it's Twitter, it's all of those things, right? You know, what it shouldn't be though is we're going to go hang Nancy Pelosi, or we're going to go do that.
Fair
Like
enough.
that type of content, I feel like absolutely should be censored, right? I don't think you should be able to say, I'm going to go kill somebody and not have, and like be able to,
Well, to me,
you know,
that's
share
more of
that.
a criminal thing, though, when you're threatening somebody's life.
Yeah.
Or,
So but what you're saying is like, where do you draw the line with censorship?
Yes.
And I think that's tough, right? Because, like you watch some of these early Mark Zuckerberg interviews where he's talking to different politicians, and like the politicians think that Facebook makes the content, right?
Yeah.
And there's the guy who's talking about the internet, who's like, it's a series of pipes, and like, they don't get technology at all, but they're also the ones writing legislation around what should and shouldn't happen, right? And so I think that you have to have, politicians who get technology that can actually make good legislation around what needs to happen, because without it, it's pointless. And we're going to have a bunch of, like the whole thing of like breaking Facebook up, right? I think that's a tough thing. I don't know how you do that, right? So I don't know. I mean, censorship is definitely one of those like hot button issues. I think that there's it is not as black and white as like what should happen in these cases, but not in these cases. And so I don't know. I mean,
Where's the ACLU though? I used to love the ACLU.
Yeah.
And it's like they've disappeared.
I called them 2 weeks ago and nothing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there's an apartment complex that had 90 Hispanic families that got booted out. And one of the guys that lived there calls me up and he says, "Hey man, I got evicted." And I'm thinking like, there's a loss in translation here. Did you get kicked out of your house? It's like, yeah. And I said, "Oh man, well, did you pay your rent?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, I paid my rent." And I said, "Well, okay, tell me what happened." So he did not speak great English, and my Spanish is probably worse than his English. And so he put a young girl on the phone, and this young girl tells me that the apartment complex announced on a Friday that these people were being evicted, and that they had to be out on Monday, right? Which there are all sorts of laws around like how you legally evict somebody, and so come to find out, like, they wanted to kick these people out so they could paint and do new carpet and go from renting it for $1,200 a month to rent it for $1,800 a month, right? So I called the ACLU and I said, "Hey, this terrible thing is being, directed at these Hispanic families. There's 90 something Hispanic families that are getting kicked out, but they're also African American and white families that live here. They're not doing anything to them, just the Hispanic families." And it was 100% of the Hispanic families that were being evicted. And so I called the ACLU. I called the councilman out there. I called a couple state representatives. And so they all got out there. I called the news. The news got out there. And the ACLU never even returned my phone call. So,
yeah, it's scary because with the ACLU, they used to be, it didn't matter if you agreed with them or not. I loved that they defended free speech. I love that they defended, they were on that side, First Amendment side of ideas. I guess what you're talking about is a little different, but at the same time, I don't know where they've gone. And my concern overall is who is standing up for those that say the very controversial things that have the rights to, when you have big tech or whoever it is censoring the dissent.
Yeah, man, I don't know. It's tough, right? Like, you almost don't need it anymore, right? Somebody can go on Facebook, they can get a community together, those people can share it, and the reach can go far beyond what.
Yeah, but it gets taken down. This is what I mean.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's what keeps happening.
Yeah,
I mean, I know this from personal experience. The shadow ban and I mean, it is a major
Yeah.
thing right now for people who say anything anti-establishment. And anti-establishment right now is something that goes against the left status quo. And, for, I guess, free thinkers, that I wouldn't really consider myself a Republican.
Yeah.
But, I think we should be having healthy debates in society with lots of different views. The idea that, one person's views can go viral and get shared, but another person's views actually are not shared at all because they take away your reach. And so
Let me ask you this though. Is there assumptions behind that, or is there data that shows that that's happening?
Oh, data. This is, this, as far as, like long studies, I don't know about that type of data, but plenty of people are getting shadow banned. You can see their reach going from one thing to another. If, for instance, they mention anything about vaccines, or before it was the Wuhan lab in China, the virus possibly coming out of there, or it could be actually a variety of right issues. Yes, you can see it. I think I called you as the election was coming up. I was like, hey, man, I'm really worried about what I'm seeing here. It was like January.
Yeah.
I'm like freaking out because I'm seeing them censor a large group of people.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, I think it's going to be okay,
Yeah.
But I was, but that's really where, that's where my concern was. And
Yeah.
it's, to me, and maybe I'm crazy, but I see us going down a road really fast right now.
Yeah.
That is, it's not the America that I knew.
Right.
Maybe certain things do need to change in America, but there's also a lot of great things about our country that I love, and I'm proud to be an American. I really am. I've lived in four countries now.
Yeah.
I mean, America's a great country, land of opportunity. It really, really is. Immigrants. I haven't actually ever been able to verify this statistic, but I heard, I think it was Nito Quibin say it on stage. People that moved here, that are immigrants rather, are 3 to 4 times more likely to become millionaires than those that were born here.
Really?
And it's like, yes, like I said, I haven't been able to verify, but I'm like, well, it makes sense because it's the land of opportunity. Someone comes here.
And they're motivated enough to leave their country and come here, and they're probably cut from a separate cloth.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. The tutoring company I work for, when I started, one of the very first things that I did is I put together like a persona of who our customer is, right? And what I realized is that, looking through it, this is what I always do. Whenever I start working for a company, I look at like who is using our product. And instead of finding like John Smith and, Bob Winters, right? It was Ping Wei Tong and all of these like very clearly, people who are not born here, right? And so as I started thinking about it, it starts to really make sense, right? Because they've moved to the United States and they realize that our education system is subpar, number one. Number two, they realize that their kids are the first generation in their family in a lot of cases that's going to live here, right? And so I grew up being multiple generations deep here in Nashville. And so, I'll meet somebody, I knew your granddad, or I know your father. And so I have so many opportunities because of that.
Well, Mike,
I appreciate it, man. This was fun.
thanks
Yeah,
so
we'll do
much
this
for
again.
coming on and chatting, and
Absolutely.
hopefully we can do it again sometime soon.
I'd love to. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks.